At first, it feels like a normal morning. That's the strange part. History never announces itself before it arrives. You wake up tired because the heat stayed trapped inside the walls all night. Your back aches from sleeping on thin bedding. Somewhere outside, a bicycle rattles across uneven pavement. Someone is preparing rice. Someone is late for work. Someone is arguing softly about nothing important. And you're alive inside a moment that still believes it has a future. You don't know that in a few minutes, your entire understanding of reality will split into two versions, before and after. You step outside, and the city feels ordinary in the way only living cities can. Clothes hanging from balconies. Schoolchildren rubbing sleep from their eyes. A woman sweeping dust into the street. Soldiers passing by with faces too young to look that exhausted. The sky is painfully clear. No storm, no warning, just sunlight. And deep down, human beings trust sunlight. That's why what happens next never fully makes sense to the mind. You hear aircraft sometimes during the war. By 1945, people have learned how to continue ordinary life beside the possibility of death. That's what humans do. They normalize terror if it stays long enough. Fear becomes routine. Routine becomes survival. Survival becomes identity. So when the sirens stop, when the danger seems distant, people breathe again. They return to schedules, conversations, tiny concerns. You start realizing later that the human brain cannot remain in constant panic forever. Eventually, it protects itself by pretending danger is manageable even when it isn't. Then something changes, not gradually. Instantly. A flash. Not light the way you understand light. Not brightness. More like the entire world becoming white so violently that your mind cannot process shape anymore. For one impossible second, shadows disappear because the light itself has become the only thing that exists. And your first thought isn't philosophical. It isn't profound. It's confusion. Because the brain always reaches for logic before terror. What was that? Then the blast arrives. Windows explode inward. Walls twist. Air itself becomes a weapon. Your body moves without permission. Sound disappears into pressure. Wood splinters like dry bones. Roof tiles become bullets. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the destruction, beneath the screaming, there's this horrifying realization, beginning to form. The world can end in the middle of a sentence. 1 second you're thinking about lunch. The next second your skin is burning. The strange part is how quickly the mind abandons dignity when survival enters the room. You don't care how you look. You don't care about pride. You don't care about tomorrow. You crawl, that's all. You crawl through dust thick enough to erase the sun. Your ears ring so loudly, it feels like your skull is screaming from the inside. You try to breathe, but the air tastes wrong. Hot, metallic. Like the city itself is bleeding into your lungs, and people begin appearing through the smoke. Not people anymore exactly. Shapes, moving slowly, silently. Hair burned away, skin hanging from fingertips. Eyes open too wide. Some holding their own arms like strangers attach them there. You expect screaming. That's what movies would teach you. But real horror often arrives quietly. People wander in silence because pain has exceeded language. And this is where something inside you begins to fracture permanently. Because human beings are not designed to witness this much suffering at once. Your brain keeps trying to organize what you're seeing into something understandable. A fire, a bombing, an accident. But none of those words are large enough. You start noticing details that stay with you forever. A child calling for their mother without crying anymore. A man sitting beside someone already dead, still speaking to them calmly as if normal conversation might reverse reality. Bodies near the river. Bodies inside the river. People drinking black water because instinct becomes stronger than caution. At some point, you stop asking what happened. The better question becomes, what are we now? Because identity collapses fast after catastrophe. The version of yourself that existed an hour ago already feels imaginary. That person had routines, dreams, annoyances, plans for next week. Now your entire consciousness shrinks down to simpler things. Water, breathing, finding someone, staying alive until night. The truth is, trauma changes time first. Minutes become endless. Memories become fragmented. You forget conversations from yesterday, but remember the exact sound of someone's footsteps disappearing into smoke. Years later, you still remember it. That's what people misunderstand about survival. Survival is not the victory. Survival is the beginning of a different kind of suffering, because eventually the fires cool.
Eventually the smoke clears enough to see the ruins. Eventually the silence after disaster arrives. And silence is where the real psychological damage begins. At first, your body keeps functioning automatically. Humans are disturbingly adaptable. You help move debris, search for family, share food if there is any. You operate on instinct, because if you stop moving, your mind catches up. And once the mind catches up, everything changes. You begin replaying moments obsessively. The last thing someone said before the flash, the direction you were facing, why you survived while others didn't. You revisit tiny decisions endlessly because guilt needs explanations to survive. If you had left home later, if you had stood somewhere else, if you had convinced someone to stay inside. Trauma turns the brain into an interrogation room, and there is no final verdict, only repetition. You start waking up before dawn without knowing why. Your nervous system never fully returns to normal. Sudden sounds become unbearable. Bright light makes your chest tighten. Sometimes you stare at ordinary objects for too long because you no longer trust ordinary life. A clear sky starts feeling dangerous. That's the cruel irony. The thing that once represented peace now reminds you of annihilation. You realize human beings don't only lose people in tragedy, they lose psychological safety. And once that disappears, the world never looks innocent again. Then something even stranger happens. Life continues. Not because people are healed, because time refuses to stop. Markets reopen. Children laugh again eventually. People rebuild homes over invisible radiation. Conversations return. Routine returns. But underneath it all, something inside everyone has shifted slightly out of alignment, like a bone that healed incorrectly, dysfunctional, but never the same. You begin noticing how survivors carry themselves differently, quietly, carefully, as if reality itself has become fragile. Because once you witness instantaneous destruction, permanence becomes impossible to believe in again. You stop trusting stability. You stop trusting tomorrow. Deep down, part of you remains emotionally frozen in that morning. And this is where the psychological transformation becomes existential. Because the bomb didn't only destroy a city, it altered humanity's relationship with existence itself. For the first time, people understood that civilization could disappear not over centuries, but in seconds. That realization enters the human nervous system permanently. Even generations later, people inherit fragments of that fear without realizing it. The constant anxiety, the obsession with control, the quiet dread beneath modern life, the feeling that everything stable is secretly temporary. You felt it there first, inside Hiroshima, inside the shadow of a single flash. And over time, memory itself becomes complicated, because forgetting feels immoral, but remembering hurts. So survivors live between two impossible responsibilities: carry the pain or betray the dead. That tension changes people. You become quieter, not wiser in the cinematic sense, just quieter. You stop wasting emotional energy on meaningless conflict because you've seen how quickly all human arguments can become irrelevant. But you also become lonelier because most people cannot emotionally enter the reality you lived through. They listen, they nod, but they don't see it when they close their eyes at night. You do, still, even decades later, especially at night. That's when memory becomes loudest. You lie awake, staring into darkness, while your mind reconstructs details with horrifying precision. The flash, the heat, the smell, the silence afterward. And the terrifying part is how ordinary the morning had been before it happened. That detail never leaves you, because catastrophe doesn't always arrive with dramatic music. Sometimes it arrives while someone is folding laundry, while someone is laughing, while someone is thinking about dinner. And that realization changes how you experience every peaceful moment afterward. You begin understanding that human life is unbelievably delicate, not metaphorically, literally. An entire city reduced to shadows burned into walls, human beings transformed into absence. The bomb forces you into a confrontation most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Nothing is guaranteed. Not your body, not your future, not the people you love, not even civilization itself. At some point, you stop asking why humans created such a weapon. The more disturbing question becomes, what kind of mind is capable of continuing life after witnessing it? And the answer is uncomfortable. The human mind adapts to almost anything, even apocalypse, especially apocalypse. That adaptability is both beautiful and horrifying, because it means people can survive unimaginable suffering. But it also means the world keeps moving after unimaginable suffering. Newspapers print new headlines. Children grow older. Buildings rise again. Tourists eventually walk streets built over ashes. And somewhere inside you, part of your consciousness remains trapped in August 1945, still staring upward at a white sky that looked too beautiful to be dangerous. Eventually, you understand something painful about memory. The world remembers events. Survivors remember sensations. The world remembers statistics. Survivors remember sounds. The world discusses history intellectually. Survivors carry it biologically. Inside heartbeat patterns, inside insomnia, inside sudden moments of silence when the past returns without warning. You start noticing how trauma isolates people from time itself. Everyone else moves forward naturally, but part of you keeps circling the same moment endlessly, like your soul never fully escaped the blast radius. And maybe that's the hidden cost of surviving history. People assume survival means you escaped, but psychologically, sometimes you never leave. The strange part is that over the years, you become deeply aware of ordinary things. A cup of water, morning sunlight through windows, the sound of distant conversation. Small moments begin feeling sacred because you understand how violently they can disappear. Most people live assuming life will continue tomorrow. You no longer have that luxury. And maybe that awareness makes you more human than before. Or maybe It simply makes you tired. A different kind of tired. The kind that settles behind the eyes permanently. The kind carried by people who have seen too much reality at once. And in the end, Hiroshima becomes more than a place in your memory. It becomes a psychological border, the dividing line between innocence and awareness, between believing humanity is progressing and realizing humanity is capable of manufacturing extinction with its own intelligence. That realization never fully stops haunting you, because the bomb wasn't only an explosion, it was a mirror. It showed humanity what humanity truly was beneath civilization, beneath morality, beneath progress. A species intelligent enough to split atoms, but emotionally immature enough to use them on itself. And maybe the deepest horror was never the fire. Maybe it was realizing the people who created it went home afterward, ate dinner afterward, slept afterward. History often sounds abstract until you place yourself inside a single body, inside a single morning, inside one human nervous system, trying desperately to understand what cannot be understood. That's when it becomes real. That's when you realize the most terrifying part of catastrophe is not always death. It's continuation. It's waking up the next day in a world that still exists after proving it could end instantly. And decades later, even after the city rebuilds, even after the world moves on, even after the scars fade from skin, there are moments when sunlight hits a room too brightly, and for 1 second, you're there again. Back in the ordinary morning, before the flash, before history tore reality open, back when the sky still felt safe.